The city of Washington, D.C., buzzed with a steady hum of activity as summer heat bore down on its streets. Among the masses, Michael Tanner stood out, a seasoned civil rights attorney with a reputation for tenacity and integrity. As he entered his office, the phone rang sharply, piercing the morning calm. It was Laura Pierce, a junior reporter from the Capital Gazette and a close friend of his late brother. "Michael, I've got something big," Laura's voice crackled with urgency. "It's about Jim Gordon. He was working on a massive exposé before he died." Michael's brow furrowed. Jim Gordon, an investigative journalist known for his fearless reporting, had been found dead under mysterious circumstances just a week prior. The official cause, a tragic accident. But rumors swirled of foul play, suggesting his work had rattled powerful cages. What was he working on? Michael asked, already reaching for a notepad. Corruption. Big names, Michael, politicians, businessmen. He had evidence, real evidence, of a massive influence peddling and money laundering ring. But everything's gone. His notes, his files, it's like they never existed. Michael's mind raced. Jim's death had struck a nerve, not just because of their shared history, but because it mirrored so many cases of journalists silenced for their work. He knew he had to pursue this, both to honor Jim and to uncover the truth. "I'll look into it," Michael promised, already thinking of the steps ahead. He hung up and dialed another number. It was time to call in some favors. The first stop was Jim's editor at the Capital Gazette, a grizzled veteran named Carl Stevenson. In the newsroom, Carl was a legend, known for his unwavering support of fearless journalism. But today, he seemed different, guarded, almost fearful. "Michael, you need to tread carefully," Carl warned. Jim was onto something big, and now he's gone. Whoever's behind this, they're dangerous. His files were wiped clean, even from our backups. But I do remember a few names and leads he was chasing. Carl handed Michael a slip of paper with a list of names and addresses, underlined with cryptic notes. Michael scanned the list: a senator, a corporate CEO, a high-profile attorney. These were not the usual suspects for petty corruption. "These are the big leagues," Michael muttered, feeling the weight of the situation. As he left the newsroom, he felt eyes on him. Paranoia, or was he being watched? Next, Michael met with Sarah, Jim's widow, a quiet woman shattered by her loss. In their modest apartment, she recounted the last days of Jim's life, her voice tinged with fear. "He was on edge, paranoid. Said he was being followed," Sarah whispered, her eyes darting to the window. "But he never told me what he found, just that it was huge and that I should be careful if anything happened to him." Michael's chest tightened. Jim had sensed the danger but pressed on. Now, Michael was stepping into his shoes, the shadow of Jim's work looming large. Back at his office, Michael sifted through the scant evidence he had, a few names, vague connections. The pieces didn't yet form a clear picture, but one name stood out: Senator Richard Miles, a powerful figure with a pristine public image. Yet, whispers of backroom deals and offshore accounts had followed him for years. Deciding to start there, Michael reached out to an old contact in the Department of Justice, hoping to get some background on Miles. The response was swift but cryptic: "Miles is untouchable, but watch your back. This is bigger than you think." That evening, Michael sat alone in his office, the city lights casting a faint glow through the window. His thoughts drifted to Jim, the risks he had taken, and the truth he had sought. There was a sharp knock on the door, startling him. It was Laura, her face pale. "Michael, there's something you need to see." She handed him a flash drive. "It's from a source Jim trusted. I don't know what's on it, but he said it was vital." As Michael plugged the drive into his laptop, a single video file appeared. He clicked play, and his screen filled with grainy footage of a clandestine meeting in a dimly lit room. The participants were obscured, but their voices were clear, discussing bribes, laundering schemes, and the movement of millions of dollars. His pulse quickened. This was the proof Jim had been after. But as the video ended, a sense of dread settled over him. Jim had paid the ultimate price for this truth, and now Michael was in possession of the same dangerous knowledge. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a new message: "Stop now or else." Michael stared at the screen, the words a stark reminder of the peril he faced. But there was no turning back. He was in deep, and the only way out was through. The echo of betrayal loomed large, and Michael knew that to uncover the truth, he would have to confront the shadows and secrets that threatened to consume him. The investigation was just beginning, and Michael Tanner was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Michael Tanner spent the following days in a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and hushed phone calls. He contacted old friends in the legal and investigative communities, seeking any scraps of information about the figures on Jim's list. Each conversation deepened his understanding of the tangled web of corruption, but it also heightened his awareness of the risks involved. One particularly tense meeting took place in a dimly lit bar in Georgetown, where Michael met with Alex Walker, a former FBI agent turned private investigator. Walker was known for his ability to dig up dirt on anyone, and he owed Michael a favor. "You're playing with fire, Michael," Walker warned, nursing a whiskey. "These guys don't just dabble in corruption, they're deeply entrenched. If Jim Gordon got close enough to them, it's no wonder he's gone." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. "I need to know more about Senator Miles. He's the key, I think. There's a lot of smoke around him, but no one's found the fire." Walker sighed, then leaned in closer. "Miles is connected to a conglomerate called Arcturus International. They operate across several industries: banking, construction, even tech. They've got deep pockets and friends in high places. Rumor is, they funnel money through offshore accounts and shell companies. Any chance we can get proof?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Proof is hard to come by," Walker replied. "But I've heard whispers about a private meeting next week in New York. The guest list is tight: politicians, business leaders, and a few consultants from overseas. If you could get in, you might find something." Michael's mind raced. Crashing a high-profile meeting wasn't just risky, it was potentially life-threatening. But he had no choice. The truth was within reach, and he owed it to Jim, and himself, to see this through. Back at his office, Michael found Laura waiting for him. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around the room. "I've been digging too," she said, handing him a folder. "It's not much, but I found a connection between Arcturus International and a company called Harbor Securities. They manage a lot of assets for high-net-worth individuals, including politicians. And guess who has accounts there? Senator Miles." Michael flipped through the documents. The evidence was circumstantial but damning: large, unexplained transfers, offshore accounts, and a series of shell companies with obscure ownership. "This is good, Laura," Michael said, feeling a spark of hope. "But we need more. Something that ties it all together, something undeniable." Laura nodded. "I thought about that. We need someone on the inside. Someone who knows the players and the game." Michael frowned. "Who do you have in mind?" Laura hesitated, then pulled out a business card. "Maria Vasquez. She was Jim's source in the Capitol. Knows the political landscape better than anyone, but she's been lying low since Jim's death. If we can convince her to help, she might be able to get us into that meeting." Michael took the card, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. Contacting Maria would be dangerous, not just for them, but for her as well. Yet, it seemed like their best shot at cracking the case. Later that night, Michael called the number on the card. A woman's voice answered, wary and curt. "Maria Vasquez? Who's asking?" "My name is Michael Tanner. I'm an attorney, and I was a friend of Jim Gordon. I know you're scared, but I think we can help each other. Jim was onto something big, and I want to finish what he started." There was a long pause, then Maria's voice came back, softer but still guarded. "Meet me at the Lincoln Memorial tomorrow, noon. And come alone." The next day, Michael approached the iconic steps of the memorial, spotting Maria standing by the reflecting pool. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet intensity. "Maria," Michael greeted her. "Thanks for meeting me," she nodded, her gaze scanning the surroundings. Jim was a good man. Brave, too. But he underestimated the people he was dealing with. "I won't make that mistake," Michael assured her. "But I need your help to get into that meeting in New York. We need proof, something concrete to expose them." Maria sighed, glancing around nervously. "I have a contact, someone who can get you in. But once you're there, you're on your own. If they find out who you are, it could be dangerous." Michael nodded. "I understand. Just get me in, and I'll handle the rest." As they parted ways, Michael felt the full weight of the task ahead. He was about to step into a den of power and corruption, with only his wits and determination to guide him. But there was no turning back now. Jim's voice echoed in his mind, a reminder of the stakes and the truth that demanded to be uncovered. That evening, back at his apartment, Michael received a call from an unknown number. He answered, hearing a familiar voice on the other end, Walker. "Michael, I've been hearing things," Walker said, his tone serious. "Word is, someone's been asking around about you. Be careful. This goes deeper than you know." As the line went dead, Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He was in deeper than he had ever imagined, and now the walls were closing in. The echoes of betrayal were growing louder, and Michael knew that the next steps would be the most dangerous yet. But he was ready. The fight for justice had only just begun, and Michael Tanner was prepared to face whatever came next. The night before the meeting in New York, Michael Tanner sat in a small, dimly lit hotel room, preparing for what felt like the most critical mission of his career. The plan was simple but perilous: infiltrate the gathering of power brokers at the upscale downtown hotel and find something, anything, that could expose the corruption at the heart of the conspiracy Jim Gordon had uncovered. Michael reviewed the documents Maria had provided. Among them was a list of attendees, including Senator Richard Miles and executives from Arcturus International. It was a veritable who's who of the powerful elite, each with their fingers in the political and economic pies of the nation. Maria had also arranged for a forged ID badge and a cover story. Michael would attend as John Masters, a legal consultant with ties to Harbor Securities. The ruse was thin, but it would have to do. His only advantage was the anonymity granted by his relatively low public profile. The next morning, Michael donned a sharp suit, slicked back his hair, and practiced his cover story. He felt the tension in his shoulders and the flutter of nerves in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. This was no time for hesitation. As he approached the hotel, the entrance was a flurry of activity. Security was tight, with metal detectors and guards screening attendees. Michael took a deep breath and presented his ID badge. The guard glanced at it, then at him, before nodding him through. He was in. The ballroom was a picture of opulence: chandeliers glittering overhead, tables draped in fine linen, and a sea of suited men and women mingling with glasses of champagne. Michael scanned the room, spotting Senator Miles engaged in a deep conversation with a man who could only be Evan Pierce, the CEO of Arcturus International. Michael moved through the crowd, nodding to a few people and catching snippets of conversation. It was clear this was more than just a networking event. Deals were being brokered, alliances solidified. He approached the table where Miles and Pierce stood, casually joining the group. So, the new tax reforms, beneficial for business or just another hurdle? Michael asked, trying to sound as though he belonged. Miles turned to him, offering a politician's practiced smile. It's all about how you navigate the system, Mr. Masters. With the right connections, any hurdle can be turned into an opportunity. Michael nodded, playing along. And I assume Arcturus has plenty of opportunities lined up? Pierce smirked. We've been very fortunate. Our international operations are expanding rapidly, thanks to some favorable legislation. And of course, the right partnerships. The implication was clear: political influence was greasing the wheels of Arcturus's success. Michael needed more than just innuendo, he needed hard evidence. As the conversation drifted to more mundane topics, he excused himself and began exploring the venue, looking for anything that might provide the proof he needed. In the hotel's business center, Michael found a terminal left unlocked. He quickly accessed the network and, using a USB drive Maria had given him, installed a data sniffing program to capture any communications that might be of interest. He prayed it would go unnoticed long enough to gather useful data. Returning to the ballroom, Michael continued to mingle, keeping an eye on his targets. Hours passed, the event's tone shifting from formal discussions to more relaxed interactions. It was then that he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Two men, standing near the bar, were discussing a cleanup operation related to a recent journalist's death. They mentioned Jim Gordon by name, discussing how his accident had been necessary to keep certain information from coming to light. Michael's heart pounded. This was it, proof of the conspiracy to silence Jim. But as he tried to edge closer, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he found himself face to face with a stern-looking man. "Mr. Masters, isn't it?" "I don't believe we've met," the man said, his voice smooth but his eyes cold. Yes," Michael stammered. "John Masters. Legal consultant." The man smiled thinly. "I'm sure you are. Why don't we step outside for a moment?" Michael felt a jolt of panic but forced himself to remain calm. He followed the man out of the ballroom and into a quiet hallway. The man's demeanor shifted instantly from polite to menacing. "I know who you are, Mr. Tanner," he said, leaning in close. "And I know why you're here. Let me make this very clear: if you value your life, you'll leave this matter alone. Go home, forget about Jim Gordon, and everything you've learned." Michael's mind raced, calculating his options. He was unarmed, outnumbered, and out of his depth. But he couldn't let this man intimidate him into abandoning the truth. "I can't do that," Michael replied, his voice steady. "This isn't just about me. It's about justice." The man's expression darkened. "Justice is a luxury you can't afford. Walk away, or you'll end up just like your friend." Before Michael could respond, the man turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the hallway. Shaken but resolute, Michael knew he had to act quickly. He returned to the business center, retrieved his USB drive, and left the hotel. Back in his hotel room, Michael accessed the files he had gathered. Among them was a series of emails detailing bribes, financial transactions, and plans to cover up any traces of the corruption. It was explosive evidence, enough to bring down everyone involved. As he sat back, exhausted but triumphant, his phone buzzed with a message: "You were warned. This is your last chance." Michael knew there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, and the danger was real. But he had the evidence he needed. Now, he had to find a way to bring it to light without endangering himself or those he cared about. The echoes of betrayal had led him to this point, and the final act was about to begin. The question now was, how far were these powerful figures willing to go to protect their secrets? And could Michael outmaneuver them in time? Michael Tanner's mind raced as he considered his next move. He had the evidence, a smoking gun in the form of emails and documents detailing the intricate network of corruption. But exposing such powerful figures wouldn't be easy. He needed a plan that would ensure the information reached the public while also protecting himself and those close to him. He decided to meet with Laura Pierce, the reporter who had been instrumental in connecting him to Jim Gordon's work. They arranged to meet in a small, nondescript coffee shop in a quiet part of the city. Michael arrived early, scanning the room for any signs of surveillance or trouble. Satisfied, he settled into a corner booth. Laura arrived shortly after, her expression a mix of determination and anxiety. She slid into the seat across from him, and Michael wasted no time in handing her a copy of the USB drive. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Emails, financial records, everything. It ties Senator Miles, Evan Pierce, and several others directly to the corruption network." Laura's eyes widened as she took the drive. "This is incredible. But it's also dangerous. These people won't hesitate to silence us if they find out we're involved." Michael nodded. "That's why we need to be smart about this. I want you to leak the information, but not all at once. Drip it out, piece by piece. It will keep them off balance and give us time to gather more evidence." Laura agreed, and they spent the next hour discussing how to safely release the information. They decided to use an anonymous online platform to leak the documents, making it harder for anyone to trace the source. They also planned to involve other journalists and news outlets to broaden the exposure and protect themselves. As they parted ways, Michael felt a sense of relief mixed with apprehension. The plan was in motion, but he knew the real danger lay ahead. The people he was targeting had vast resources and wouldn't hesitate to use them to protect their interests. That evening, Michael returned to his apartment, still wary of surveillance. He checked his phone and saw a missed call from an unknown number. His heart raced as he listened to the voicemail, a deep, gravelly voice threatening him to back off or face dire consequences. Undeterred, Michael contacted Maria Vasquez, the insider who had helped him get into the meeting. He needed her help to identify some of the more obscure figures mentioned in the emails. They agreed to meet at a small park, a place where they could talk without fear of being overheard. At the park, Maria looked more tense than before. She handed Michael a list of names and brief profiles, including some high-ranking government officials and business executives. "These are the people you need to worry about," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're not just involved, they're the architects of this whole scheme." Michael studied the list, recognizing a few names from his own research. "And you think they'll come after us?" Maria nodded. "They already know you're involved. I've been hearing things, rumors that they're planning something big. You need to be careful." As they parted ways, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He took a roundabout route back to his apartment, checking for any signs of a tail. Once home, he locked all the doors and windows and set his phone to silent, trying to block out the rising tide of fear. The next day, the first batch of leaked documents appeared online, sparking a flurry of media coverage. Headlines blared about the corruption scandal, naming Senator Miles and other key players. Public outrage grew, and calls for investigations and resignations rang out across social media and news outlets. But with the attention came increased scrutiny. Michael noticed a black SUV parked near his building, its occupants seemingly keeping watch. He also received more threatening messages, each more ominous than the last. Determined not to back down, Michael continued working with Laura and other journalists, feeding them more documents and insights. The story snowballed, with new revelations coming to light daily. The pressure on the conspirators mounted, and cracks began to show in their defenses. One evening, as Michael was preparing another batch of documents for release, his phone buzzed with a call from an old colleague, David Crane, now a federal prosecutor. Michael answered, hoping for good news. "Michael, you've kicked a hornet's nest," David said without preamble. "I've been hearing things, rumors about a hit on you. You need to get somewhere safe, and fast." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "A hit? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," David replied. "These people are ruthless. They won't hesitate to take you out if they think you're a threat." Michael's mind raced. He had anticipated legal and political retaliation, but this was something else entirely. He thanked David for the warning and immediately began packing a bag. He needed to disappear, at least until the storm blew over. He called Laura, urging her to go into hiding as well. "We've done our part," he said. "Let the authorities handle the rest. But stay safe." As Michael left his apartment, he felt a mix of fear and determination. He had come too far to stop now, but he also knew he needed to stay alive to see justice served. He decided to head to a secluded cabin owned by a friend, a place where he could lie low and continue coordinating the leaks from a distance. Driving through the night, Michael kept checking his rearview mirror, half expecting to see the black SUV following him. But the road remained clear, and he reached the cabin without incident. He settled in, checking the news and monitoring the fallout from the leaks. The scandal had reached a boiling point. The public demanded accountability, and several politicians and executives were already facing intense scrutiny. But Michael knew that the real battle was still ahead. The conspirators were powerful and desperate, and they would do anything to silence those who threatened their empire. As he sat in the darkened cabin, Michael resolved to see this through to the end. He had become the echo of Jim Gordon's fight, and he wouldn't let that echo fade into silence. The final act was approaching, and Michael was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant risking everything for the truth. Michael Tanner's decision to go into hiding was a wise one. The story was unraveling faster than he had anticipated, and the tension surrounding the scandal had reached a fever pitch. As more documents were released, the extent of the corruption became clear. Politicians, business leaders, and even members of law enforcement were implicated in a vast network of bribery, money laundering, and influence peddling. The public outcry was immense, and the pressure on authorities to act was growing by the hour. From the relative safety of the secluded cabin, Michael continued to coordinate with Laura and other journalists, feeding them a steady stream of revelations. Each leak was more damning than the last, and the media frenzy showed no signs of abating. But with each day that passed, Michael knew he was living on borrowed time. The conspirators would not sit idly by while their empire crumbled. Late one night, Michael received a call from Maria Vasquez. Her voice was urgent, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Michael, I have something for you," she said. "A recording. It's explosive, proof of the orders to kill Jim Gordon. But I can't stay on the line long. They're on to me. Meet me at the old boathouse, midnight. Come alone." Michael's heart pounded. This was the breakthrough they needed, the final piece of evidence to bring the entire conspiracy down. But it was also incredibly risky. If Maria was being watched, meeting her could be a trap. He weighed his options and decided the risk was worth it. He grabbed his phone, keys, and a flashlight, then headed out into the night. The old boathouse was an isolated spot on the outskirts of the city, a relic from a bygone era. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting, but also for an ambush. As Michael approached the boathouse, the air was thick with tension. He parked a distance away and walked the rest, staying hidden in the shadows. The structure loomed in the darkness, a silhouette against the moonlit sky. He paused, listening for any signs of danger, then cautiously approached the entrance. Inside, the boathouse was dimly lit by a single lantern. Maria stood in the center of the room, her face pale but resolute. She held a small device in her hand, a digital recorder. "This is it," she said, handing it to Michael. "The proof. They planned everything, the bribes, the murders, even the cover-ups. It's all here." Michael took the recorder, his hands shaking slightly. "Thank you, Maria. You've done an incredible thing." She nodded, but her expression was grim. "I can't stay. They know I'm involved. I have to disappear." Michael felt a pang of guilt and concern. "Be careful, Maria. And thank you for everything." She turned to leave, but as she reached the door, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. Michael's blood ran cold. He ducked behind a stack of old crates, motioning for Maria to hide. The sound of car doors slamming and footsteps echoed through the night. "Search the place," a voice commanded. "They have to be here." Michael's heart pounded as he heard the footsteps approach. He held his breath, the digital recorder clutched tightly in his hand. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped, as a flashlight beam swept the room. "Over here," a voice called out, and the footsteps converged on Maria's hiding spot. Michael sprang into action, lunging from his cover and striking the nearest man with a heavy piece of wood. The man went down, but two others rushed him, grabbing his arms and pinning him to the ground. Michael struggled, but they were too strong. Well, Mr. Tanner," the leader said, stepping into the light. It was the same man who had confronted him at the hotel. "You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?" Michael glared up at him, defiant. "It's over. The truth is out there, and nothing you do can stop it." The man smirked, pulling out a gun. "Maybe not. But we can stop you. And her. He gestured to Maria, who was being restrained by another man. She looked terrified but defiant. Michael's mind raced, searching for a way out. He still had the recorder. If he could get it to Laura, they could publish the final piece of evidence. But he needed to buy time. Wait! Michael shouted, struggling against his captors. You don't have to do this. There's no need for more bloodshed. The leader laughed. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about need. It's about power. And we can't afford loose ends. As he raised the gun, a sudden commotion erupted outside. Shouts and the sound of running feet filled the air. The door burst open, and a group of men in tactical gear stormed in, weapons drawn. FBI! Drop your weapons, one of them shouted. The room erupted into chaos. The men holding Michael released him, scrambling for their guns, but it was too late. The FBI agents moved with practiced precision, quickly subduing the conspirators and securing the area. Michael staggered to his feet, dazed and relieved. An agent approached him, helping him up. Are you all right, Mr. Tanner? The agent asked. Michael nodded, still catching his breath. How did you find us? The agent smiled. We've been monitoring their communications ever since the first leaks. When we intercepted a call about this meeting, we moved in. Maria was safe, being led out by another agent. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. The conspiracy was exposed, and the people responsible were being brought to justice. The next few days were a blur of media coverage, arrests, and official statements. The recordings Maria had provided were released, confirming the involvement of high-ranking officials and business leaders in the conspiracy. The fallout was immense, with numerous resignations, investigations, and public outcry. Michael and Laura received praise for their courage and determination, but they knew the real hero was Jim Gordon, whose relentless pursuit of the truth had sparked the entire investigation. Michael felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing they had honored Jim's memory by bringing the truth to light. As the dust settled, Michael returned to his normal life, though he knew things would never be the same. The case had changed him, deepening his resolve to fight for justice and exposing corruption wherever it lurked. One evening, as he sat in his apartment, his phone rang. It was Laura. Hey, Michael, she said. I just wanted to thank you. For everything. Michael smiled. No, thank you, Laura. We made a great team. She paused, then added, so, what now? Michael looked out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Now, we keep going. There are always more stories to uncover, more truths to tell. And we owe it to Jim, and to ourselves, to keep fighting. As they ended the call, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. The echoes of betrayal had led him on a harrowing journey, but in the end, justice had prevailed. And though the road ahead was uncertain, he knew he was ready to face whatever challenges came his way, with courage and determination. The final chapter in the saga of corruption and betrayal had been written, but for Michael Tanner, the story was far from over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where the pursuit of truth and justice would guide his every step.